With week 11 of the NFL season already underway, there are a handful of teams at the top of the NFL that have completely separated themselves from the rest of the pack. Meanwhile, there are still teams searching for an identity and some divisions that are still up for grabs. Want to find out what matchups could have divisional implications as well as Super Bowl implications? Stay tuned to find out on Gridiron Gab Pro Style. Welcome back, Gabbers. Thank you all for joining us yet again for another edition of Gridiron Gab Pro Style. I am, of course, the one and only Mr. CeeLo here. And it's actually been pretty eventful since I've gotten back into the saddle over here at Gridiron Gab. Thank you guys so much. Listen, I totally understand if you have a reservation about joining into the conversation. My whole goal here is to make conversation and maybe say something that the mainstream sports analysis analysts don't say, and maybe kind of get our feelings and words out there. As many of you, as we've discussed over the duration of this show, is that many of you truly understand how I feel and understand exactly, how I think. And many of you think the same way. So, as I said, there aren't many comments here. Most of the comments I've gotten have been from the T. Higgins show that I did, that the Cincinnati Bengals were going to deal him. And I'm actually going to do a show that is going to push the narrative a little bit more, that the Bengals need either to trade him. They need to get some kind of value for him. There's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. I am a firm believer, whether you're a Bengals fan or whether your team is someone else, you should never let your top three picks, that means first, second, third round picks, go for nothing. They should never just walk. Even if you have to pull a sign and trade deal to get picks. Because the reality of it is, even if you're signing dead money, I know what people are going to say, I hate signing dead money, but the truth of the matter is you're going to draft a kid that is going to make substantially less money than you would have had to pay him. So ultimately, that dead money, if you can work out a deal to only pay that, maybe get that off your books in 2 years, that turns out to be a really good deal, because you still have 2 years where you can play around with the salary cap, especially if one of your players that you sign in that class is on a rookie deal. But without further ado, let us get into the exciting Week 11 schedule that is slated, ladies and gentlemen, and it has got a couple of boogers on it. But as we say, we're going to try to get into the level of the lesser matchups, if you will. The first one we have on tap is going to be the Jaguars and the 8-1 Lions. Do we really want to see this one? I mean, this game's not going to be close, because right now it's projected that Trevor Lawrence is going to be out. And the Lions, having gone down 20 points to the C.J. Stroud and the Texans last week on Sunday Night Football, and making a complete just turnaround in the game. I mean, the game within the game was just absolutely phenomenal. And oh my goodness, this was not even this. Yeah, I hate to say it like this. I think the only way they're going to have a shot at winning this game is Etienne's going to have to be big, and Goff's going to have to throw 5 turnovers. And ultimately, this is going to be a game where the Jaguars are going to have to hope for a ton of mistakes, and they're going to have to throw the football and throw it well. It's just, yeah, it's just, this is not a good game. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it until Jacksonville shows what that they can accomplish something with Mac Jones at the helm. I don't see that happening. They're finally starting to get. Defense is finally starting to come alive, but ultimately, I don't see it. I don't see it. But I'm taking the Lions more than likely big. Now, Rams against Patriots. Normally, had the Rams not lost and the Patriots had not won last week, this would be an easy game to look at. But unfortunately, with the Patriots pulling off their victory like they did last week, ultimately it's one of those games where you just kind of look at it and you say, okay, where did this come from? And I will say this, I'm not saying that they've got it together, but the Rams are not as good as a 4-5 team. They're not. You've got 3 pieces. I would argue 4. Matt Stafford, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, and Kyren Williams. But outside of that, I mean, there's a lot to be desired when you look at the Los Angeles Rams. And ultimately, as I said, the Patriots just starting to look more like a team with a all-around identity. You really can't pinpoint what they want to do. Well, let me rephrase it. They want to play good defense, turn you over, and run the football. And slowly but surely, Drake May, I'm not saying he's a superstar, y'all. Don't think I'm doing that. But he's slowly starting to show that he's got some idea of what it is to play quarterback in the National Football League. He's not forcing bad throws. He's taking what the defense gives him, and he's extending plays. Matt Stafford, on the other hand, has an assortment of weapons, and they're just not getting it done. I mean, we can sit and we can come up with ideas of how to make them better, but that Miami game was just an example of them not getting it done. I mean, to me, this was a better team. The Rams were a better team than Miami right now. And Matt Stafford didn't look good. He did not. And I don't know if it's going to get any better. But it would not surprise me if the New England Patriots lost this game. I think ultimately, do I think the Rams are good at stopping the run? I don't. But as I said, it wouldn't surprise me if the Patriots won this game, but I don't foresee it happening. I think this is going to be a game the Rams win. But ultimately, it would not surprise me. Next, we got the 2-7 Browns against the 3-7 Saints. Well, you look at these two teams. It's a tale of two teams that have quarterback issues. Now, the Browns, on the other hand, I will say that was not a pretty display that they had against the Chargers. Now, granted, they're coming off the game 27-10, and I don't know. I ultimately think the defense is doing more than its share. Now, a lot of people look back at 27-10 and say, well, they're not doing enough. Well, to me, for a team that's lost one of its premier players in Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah and still figuring out ways to be in games. I mean, it's not like you're just walking all over Cleveland. I think ultimately that is what is going to be the difference in this game this week. I think they've got a really good front four, arguably one of the best. They get pressure, and ultimately this is how they turn you over. The surprise is that this offensive line had been one of the best over the last 4 or 5 seasons, culminating with Nick Chubb being as dangerous a running back as he's been. I think ultimately when the Saints can run the football is when they're at their best. And here's the dilemma. I don't think New Orleans is going to be able to run the football. However, this Saints team is a team that has been able to give up a large amount of yards on the ground to the run. This could very well be the game that Nick Chubb and the Cleveland Browns get on track and ultimately get back to their winning ways. Now, as for the season, with them being 2-7, it's a foregone conclusion that this is gone. This is gone about like the old Pharaohs in the Valley of the Kings.
What? You don't get it, do you?
Yeah, I know. But ultimately, the Cleveland Browns can actually come up with some things. Now, the question is, you got a lot of bottom teams. This is why I said there have been a lot of teams, several teams that have separated themselves from the bottom. We got a lot of teams on the bottom this year, you guys. There are teams that, with a large number of wins, we got several. We got one undefeated. We got a couple 8-1 teams, 7-2 teams. But then there's everybody else. And ultimately, it's going to be determined, in my opinion, which team feels like they can get the most value for that first pick. That's what I believe. Now, as far as Cleveland goes, they could use a top-notch quarterback. I think Deshaun Watson is shot. I don't know. I hate saying that, but the reality of it is it doesn't look good. But as for the game, I'm rambling a little bit. I'm going to go with the Cleveland Browns. I think the Browns get the running game going. I think they get pressure and they cause turnovers. I think Cleveland, after their bye week, gets back on track, and New Orleans is still trying to figure it out. Whoo! The 4-6 Colts versus the 3-7 descending Jets.
Mayday! 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 What the hell is?
That's gotta be what the Jets are screaming right now. Mayday. Now, I know. Yeah, right now, if you're a Jets fan, this has got to be one of the most disappointing. People are going to say the Jets are accustomed to disappointment. You're not accustomed to the disappointment that has happened this season. I can tell you right now, when you have high expectations, when your expectations are extremely high, nothing is worse than seeing them collapse. I mean, this has got to be a total and utter disaster. Because the reality of it is, you're 3-7. And I remember what was said on First Take when this came in. Could they turn this around? And I think there were 2-5, I think they were. Or maybe 1-5. I don't remember. But I can tell you with a straight face that I remember saying to myself, well, they could make it up. But there's an issue here. You know who he is? Stephen A's bad man ain't so bad no more. And here's the truth. When you really start to dabble into what is wrong with the New York Jets, the big picture becomes Aaron Rodgers ain't got it no more. And I'm going to be honest with you. I said in my show where the New York Jets were going to be contenders to knock off the Chiefs, I said all they needed was for Aaron Rodgers to be a piece of what he was. He's not even that. I mean, look, when you get a piece of Aaron Rodgers, guess what? You're getting over 230, 240, 250, and a couple of touchdowns. This is not a football team that stinks. This is a football team that has a lot of talent around it. And I would argue this is one of the more talented teams that Aaron Rodgers has ever played with. He just ain't getting it done. This is a situation where Aaron Rodgers got the dag. I mean, people are going to sit there and they're going to say, okay, well, what do you need to do here? Well, my answer is, do I still think Aaron Rodgers can get it done? I think it's a lot when you talk about a guy coming off an Achilles injury. It's a huge disparity between coming off of a fresh season and then you're talking about coming off of an Achilles injury. Now, I'm not saying that he's not over that, but I think, when you talk about timing and getting comfortable yet again and getting acclimated to things, this is why I thought it was so important that he get out there and he actually participate in preseason. See, because now you could think you got 3 games. Instead of this being another 10th game, this could have been the 7th game he got in. But I can tell you, when I saw them on that, I believe it was Thursday night against the Patriots. I believe that's when it was. What was that game name? Yeah, it was the first time against the Patriots. In week 3, I thought this was going to be it. And unfortunately, it was not. It was a game that they ultimately failed to get it done. But, I mean, we look at the schedule. The Jets have lost 10-9, 23-17, 23-20, 25-22, 21-13. They beat the Texans. But the truth of the matter is that they've had too many of these one-touchdown games that they haven't been able to. This is normally where Aaron Rodgers' wheelhouse is that he's capable of getting these games and winning them. But then you've got the Colts, who have a pretty good running game, but the quarterback position is yet again an issue for the Colts. And this cannot continue to be the Achilles heel for this football team. It has to start to become a situation where that it's not a liability. Then it can become a strength. And they've gone from Joe Flacco, now they're going back to Anthony Richardson. And ultimately, this is a game of which, when they play, it's whether or not their opponent is going to give them the game. And I'm not saying they haven't earned those games, but I will tell you this. I've seen a lot of games that the Jets have won this year where the other team wanted it more and they got it. And I saw that Houston game and I thought to myself, okay, Houston doesn't want this game. Not saying that they didn't play well, they just didn't want it. But ultimately, I'm looking at the Jets and I think they get back on track. Finally, I think Rodgers is going to finally get it figured out. But watch me, I've been with him the last couple of weeks saying the exact same thing. I guess I'm looking as Rodgers to be Aaron Rodgers from 2018, 19, and 20. Next, we got a game that's, I will say this, Vikings and Titans. This game has the ability to go the Titans' way if they can do 2 things, because we've already seen what Darnold is capable of when he force feeds Justin Jefferson. And the difficult part is the Titans don't really have a running game. Callahan has not established a running game, and this is the problem for the Tennessee Titans. You're putting the entire offense on the shoulders of Will Levis or whoever your quarterback is at that moment. And the truth of the matter is you can't do anything with that. When you are basically taking an entire offense with a guy who hasn't proven anything that he can carry an offense, then you have an issue because you don't have a running game. Whereas the Vikings have Justin Jefferson and they have Aaron Jones as a back. But the reality of it is they have just enough of a running game to keep you honest. With Aaron Jones, Cam Akers. The reality of what Minnesota does is Minnesota's offense totally dependent upon what Justin Jefferson can do. It is not dependent upon anything else except what he can do. And you can tell based upon how Sam Darnold tries to feed him the football. And honestly, if this unit does not get more TJ Hawkinson involved, they're going to get walloped. And another guy that they have, and I don't really see them featuring him as much, is Jalen Naylor. That is very concerning to me. Because I'm like, this is a guy that can be a baller. And he was when Justin Jefferson was out last season. So the reality of it is, this is going to end up being a double-edged sword for the Minnesota Vikings in this game if they're not careful. Because with the Titans make mistakes. But then again, when they get in their 2-minute offense, it's like something clicks. And I don't understand why they just don't pick up the pace. Ridley's had some really good games since Nuke Hopkins was traded. He's had double digits in catches, I think, the last 2 games. So it seemed like he and Levis are starting to figure it out. But I'm of the belief that the Vikings are going to force him into mistakes with that Brian Flores defense, and it's going to cause a lot of issues there. And I foresee the Minnesota Vikings winning another close one. But it wouldn't be surprising if the Tennessee Titans made a run or actually pulled in a couple of close call opportunities and make this game very interesting. Then we got the Raiders showing up against the 3-6 Dolphins, whom, as I alluded to earlier, had a win against the Rams. Even though it wasn't pretty, I foresee this being the opportunity that the Dolphins have needed, because Tua wasn't good. He was okay. Devon Achane was okay. But you've got to get Tyreek Hill going. This looks like the perfect opportunity against a Raiders secondary that's not very good. Needless to say, this is looking like a situation where the Dolphins could come out, even with the Raiders being in a situation where they need to win, and they may tank. Who knows? I'm not saying that's feasible, but it's a possibility that they tank. But I'm looking at a Dolphins team who still feels like they smell the playoffs. They're 3-6. It's not an impossibility they can rack off a winning streak. Now, it's not probable, but it could happen. They could finish the season 11-6 or 10-7. Buffalo's all alone in that first place spot, but I'm gonna tell you, there's gonna be a possibility that we have a 500 wild card team. I mean, a sub 500 wild card team. I think Tyreek Hill gets going. The Raiders, on the other hand, really don't have anything outside of Max Crosby. And I think he makes an impact in this game, but it's not going to be a situation where he is going to be that the Dolphins are going to let him wreck this game plan. They're not going to let Max Crosby ruin the play designs and the game plans. That's not going to happen. But I see Miami going on and winning and starting what's probably going to be a massive win streak. But I will say, in the Raiders' defense, I would definitely look at this game and say that don't be surprised if they get Brock Bowers more involved. And if Michael Mayer is able to play on Sunday, that would be a huge get back. If they can get him back in uniform, this would be a huge addition. And honestly, I don't understand why there is no Terrace Marshall. Terrace Marshall would be able to pay huge dividends for the Raiders if they could get him in this game. But ultimately, I still see the Raiders falling in this one. Then we've got Packers versus Bears. Now, here's a real issue. You all know about the fire with the dismissal of Shane Waldron, and the reality of it is, it should have came sooner, because when you go from the type of individuals that are, when you go from the calls that they had earlier in the season where it looked like there was going to be some level of success with Caleb Williams, and then you went away from it. Like that very first preseason game that they had, it looked like you had a clue the way you were calling plays and the way this game was going. And ultimately, where you go in this situation is you try to simplify things more to Caleb Williams' style. There's no excuse when you got Cole Kmet, and I'll get back to him in a minute. When you got Cole Kmet, when you got Keenan Allen, when you got DJ Moore, when you got Rome Odunze, you've got a onslaught of weapons. Now, I will say this, the running back position is something to be desired, because the reality of it is, it's But then you got to look. You do have Rashawn Johnson and DeAndre Swift. Now, the reality of it is you have to have complementary players that complement each other. And the problem I see is you've got two has-been number ones, and I'm not saying they're has-beens. They've been number ones on their team. Then you bring in a guy who was arguably a number one at his college. Well, there's no arguably he won the Biletnikoff Award, but he would have won the Biletnikoff Award. You know, but the truth is when you have of ability that when you have the level of ability that the receiving core has, and then you factor in Cole Kmet, who is not seeing the football at all, but there were games in which he did, and that was when he was at his most comfortable. And the truth is when you get a guy that is comfortable with certain things, you need to stick with them. I've seen this offense change and change and change, and it's like, will y'all stick with something, please? The defense has not been that bad. I can honestly say that the defense for the Chicago Bears has been fair. But fair's not going to be enough against Jordan Love and the Packers. I don't see this team as being one of those teams that necessarily have a full-fledged identity. I mean, you see it as what it is. You think, you say this is Jordan Love's team, but I don't see it as a team that is... I don't see it as a team that is found itself fully on offense, because there are some days where they haven't figured out that they need to run the football. There are times that they do a good job when Jordan Love's not playing. But outside of that, I think there are times they throw it too much. Listen, I think ultimately needs to happen is they need to understand there are some times when you don't need to throw it. Live and die by the legs of Josh Jacobs. And I'm not saying that just because he's on my fantasy team. I'm telling you, I like to see teams that if you have the ability to run, if you have the ability to run the dang ball. It doesn't have to be pretty as long as you get the dub. To me, this is going to be one of those games you don't want to throw into that Bears defense. You want to try to run it. Run it, and then throw it sparingly. Use play action against this Bears defense because it's one of the few. It's one of the few strengths that they have. So, but ultimately, I look at the Packers being able to win this game, but I think the Bears defense keeps it close. I think they're going to keep it close for a little while, and if they can, Bears can keep the turnovers minimal, then they have a shot. But I ultimately think the Packers are going to win this game. They'll wear them down, and they'll do a great job keeping their offense in it. But until the offense can play with the same level of energy. Next, we got the 6-4 Falcons and the 5-5 Broncos. The Denver Broncos are actually a surprise. Now, maybe not to the fans out in Colorado, but they're a very big surprise to me for this reason and this reason alone. The Denver Broncos have Bo Nix, and the disaster that is been Sean Payton is, I'm going to look at this and I'll say to myself, he has done a pretty good job turning this team around. And it's amazing considering the amount of players that he has. He's been able to get a lot out of very little, and I'm actually impressed. This is one of the matchups that I'm calling one of Mr. CeeLo's matchups of the week. I've actually got 4 of them this week. And this one's going to be one of those ones, if you're not careful, you'll miss it. The Denver Broncos have impressed me in that Bo Nix has started to get a handle on this offense somewhat. Now, I will say it's against inferior defenses. They've done a pretty good job against offensively. But then you can't deny how good that defense has been. for Sean Payton and company. They've been exceptionally good, and considering the injuries that they've had, they've done a relatively good job slowing teams down, and they're right there on the cusp of middle of the road. And they've really done a great job utilizing the talent that they have. Whether it's Cortland Sutton, Lil Jordan Humphrey, who's a guy who has been in the league for a long time, but really never materialized as a number one out of Texas. I love this kid. I love big receivers. Listen, guys, any of you watch my show know I am a huge fan of the big wide receiver. Why? People will say, oh, you like to throw those back shoulders and them fades, which only are like 15 to 20%. Well, I think the numbers are less than that, but the truth is those fades would work if you had more, if you had bigger receivers being thrown to. You got to remember, you still got guys that are 5'11", 6 foot, 6'1" that are being thrown. You get a percentages of the T. Higgins, and I need to do the math on that. I think T. Higgins' percentage is right around 40 to 50%, and as well as guys like Cortland Sutton and George Pickens in Pittsburgh. And I'm just going to say it. When you get a guy that is bigger, and he's got a bigger matchup, you got to take that. I don't care what the percentages are. You have to take those opportunities when they're there. Those mismatches that you cannot, you got to explore. I'll take a down, that high risk, high reward type of deal. I will always take that. That's never going to be a situation where I'm looking at it and saying that's not going to work. But what's been really impressive about this team is Audric Estime has taken over the starting role for Javonte Williams. And a lot of it has to do with he's a complement to what Bo Nix is. You get a team that wants to play up the line because you've got a big physical presence running the football, and you've got to be able to take him down and not give him any room to maneuver, and that is what they do in Denver. And he had some troubles early on in the season with fumbles, but I don't see it being as big an issue anymore. But as I said, I think this is going to be a game where the Falcons can't get any pass rush. This could be a very well a repeat of the Carolina game with one difference. Let us mosey on to the Atlanta Falcons offensive side of the ball. Now, looking at the Falcons and really starting to analyze what they have, there were rumors that Michael Penix Jr. could start this week, given the struggles that Kirk Cousins has had. You know, the way the quarterback situation is over the NFL landscape, the Falcons very well could trade Kirk Cousins. And I know people are going to say, well, they've got a large guarantee tag on his head. Well, it did make sense to me for the Falcons to do it, but the truth of the matter is you hate having guaranteed money tied up in a guy that is no longer with you. But even if that's the case, you will be done by the time Michael Penix is due for his fifth-year option. So ultimately, I feel like if the Falcons were to get in a situation where things were to get kind of dire, that Michael Penix Jr. would get a look. But I also feel like if he keeps having games like he's had recently, he very well could be benched. You got Drake London, Darnell Mooney, Ray McLeod, and Kyle Pitts. There's no reason there should be bad games coming out of you if you're Kirk Cousins. Games like indecisive games of where to go with the football are not games that you need to have. People will say, well, nobody's perfect and this, that, and the other, but having a 3-sack, 2-sack, 2-sack, 3-sack games because you're holding the football, and you go back to the Seattle game that they lost where he had a pick he had 2 picks and only 1 touchdown, and then in the game last week where you have you have an INT and no touchdowns. And then you look at it, you're 23 of 38, 306. Yeah, I mean, they didn't give you all of that so you could turn around and not make a play. I mean, that's just that just ain't what you want to see. But it to me the dying issue with the Atlanta Falcons is they're not getting Bijan Robinson the football. I mean, yeah, he's got 748 on the ground. Algiers got 429. I get it. But you're running the ball 269 times and Cousins throwing it for 333. You got two backs like these gentlemen right here, and they're very good backs. And then you're not getting a pass rush. You already know what you're going to have to do with Kyle Pitts at the end of the season. And a guy like me who, I love my current tight ends, but I'm drooling over him. I could always use another one. I'm going to keep saying it, Falcon fans. If you ain't going to run the football, Kyle Pitts needs to get the ball. But ultimately, I see the Falcons in a crossroads. And I think that's crossroads right here is going to lead out of Denver with a loss. Next, we got the Sunday Nighter, which is the 4-6 Bengals versus the 6-3 Los Angeles Chargers. I am looking at a team that is going to be ecstatic that they are getting its star wide receiver, T. Higgins, back. And, you know, when you watch the Cincinnati offense and how good Joe Burrow has been this season, you simply say to yourself, do they need him? And I get it. The defense has been an issue, as they know, as you know, Trey Hendrickson is not going to play in this game. But I can't say that the offense can't be better. I know a lot of people are going to say that's crazy, but the reality of it is they don't score on every drive. If you're not scoring on every drive, then there's some things that you can do better. There are things you can do better. And the truth of the matter is, whether you're a football team that runs it or you throw it or whatever the case may be, the truth of the matter is there are always ways you can make yourself better. And I'm just going to say it to this capacity. The Bengals need T. Higgins. Because what happens is there are certain plays on third down. There are certain plays in the red zone. You know, a guy like him simplifies the decision making. Joe's been great looking around and finding other guys, but could you imagine how effective and efficient that offense would be if you have T. Higgins? Just saying. And the defense for the Bengals is getting better as well. You can look at this Baltimore game and you can say, hey, that the Bengals. The Bengals are a team that they've been the victim of a lot of close games. The only game that they really got absolutely dog walked on would be the Philadelphia game. And I'm going to say it like this. Had T. Higgins played in that game, the game's different. It's different. You know, this is a guy that he is a playmaker and a game changer. And it's different when you got a guy on the sidelines that's not out there. So they're hoping to get Orlando Brown back. If they can get him back, that's a huge push, because Burrow's been having to do a lot of extending of plays. He's done a phenomenal job of that, extending plays and being able to get out of situations that this offensive line is still showing they're incapable of being that great offensive line that you can just stand back there and let Burrow pick you apart. To me, that's going to always be an Achilles heel. If you go and you sign T. Higgins in free agency, you're going to ultimately continuously be re-signing pieces to put into the offensive line as well as the defense. You've only got Hendricks for 2 more years, and I think you've got Logan Wilson for 3 more years. And then, like I said, you've got Hubbard, who you've signed. You're going to have some guys that you're going to have to part with continuously when you keep your core together. And that's the most important thing. You have to realize what your core is. And then you look at the Los Angeles Chargers, who's a team that, in my opinion, has been a shock. Justin Herbert has, in my opinion, has adjusted well to the style of play that you see out of Harbaugh. And Harbaugh's done a great job of mixing and matching. Surprisingly enough, it's been enough to be able to, keep the balance and also keep Herbert happy, and considering the weapons that he has. And Ladd McConkey has been just absolutely impressive his first season as a NFL wide receiver. His route running has translated over exceptionally well. He's become quickly one of the favorite targets of Justin Herbert, and it's impressive to watch. And Quentin Johnston has, it's almost like those two are perfect complements to each other. Ladd eats up the little bitty stuff, and Quentin Johnston, when he's on the field, he's getting it down the field, and that's what you want, so that running game led by J.K. Dobbins can be effectively and efficient as possible. And needless to say, when you start really becoming a unit that understands what your purpose is on offense and what your identity is, then things really start to happen. What's really great is we've seen games where the running game was not efficient, and Justin Herbert still has that ability to sling it. So it's great that you see that the coaching staff for the Chargers understands when they need to do what they need to do, but not good at the pass rush. They're somewhat at middle of the road against the run. But I'm seeing this as a game where that the Chargers are going to be able to instill their will. I think the Chargers are quietly one of the most disrespected teams in all of the NFL. And I just think the Chargers have a much more grip on things, but I honestly think that the Cincinnati Bengals pull out this game, and I think ultimately this is going to be one of those games where that when you really sit down and you analyze what you're watching, that the Bengals with T. Higgins are going to just be too much. Now, that's where I'm at with this. I think the Higgins and the Bengals are going to be too much, and they're not going to be able to bounce back. Next, we've got the 8-15. We got the Cowboys, who are slumping. And then you got the Texans, whom, for no more than what we've seen from them, there are times that they look like they could just absolutely win the Super Bowl. And C.J. Stroud looks like a Hall of Famer. And the truth of the matter is, we're watching two teams going in somewhat opposite directions. I think ultimately, when you look at C.J. Stroud, what you're seeing a quarterback that's having his up and downs here in the second sophomore season. But then you see the Cowboys, whom are already dealing with their issues when you look at Dak going on IR and having to have surgery on that hamstring. But they did make a move that everybody's scoffing at, and I'm not so sure why that is. And I know people are going to say, well, why would you make this move now instead of next year? I think ultimately they want to set this up where they can start next season fresh. And everybody's going to say, well, you gave up a fourth. I mean, what are you doing? Well, I'm just going to say from this standpoint that I think that this football team, they understand what they got to do. They understand that this season is nothing short of a cluster. They need to basically make it exciting as much as they possibly can. Get a guy in here who's going to get the culture situated. And I think that's what they did with the Jonathan Mingo trade. I think it's going to be a completely positive move for the Cowboys. And everybody's giving them the business because, as I said, they have a lot of people that ultimately don't like them. I'm not a Cowboys fan. I'm not a hater either. But to me, this could be a team that could build some momentum for next season. I mean, they're 3-6. Do I think they're going to come back in here with the Commanders and the Eagles? No, but I would say if the Cowboys can figure out some creative way to run the football, we've already figured out Mike McCarthy's not going to be there next year. And I don't even want to get started on the coach from Colorado possibly coming over here and taking this job because it would be a bad fit. This ain't college. But I ultimately see the Texans giving a lot of issues on that front four. They're going to put a lot of pressure on the offensive line for the Cowboys, which is not young anymore. I mean, people have to remember that the Cowboys' offensive line seemingly has been around forever. Guys, y'all know how old Dallas? Look at this. You got Tyler Guyton, Tyler Smith, Zach Martin. Guys, I remember Zach Martin when I was almost I think I was fresh out of my dang 30s. They took him 10 years ago. 10 years ago. I remember when he was a stud at Notre Dame. And that's when Notre Dame slowly started becoming the offensive line university. And then defensively, people have figured you out. They figured out they can run the football on you. Michael Parsons is back, but you still got Deron Bland, who's not back, one of the top corners in the league. You've got a great pass rush, and you got a great secondary, but you got to stop the run. And see, I would challenge anybody that said that Jeremy Chinn was not as efficient as he needed to be. Jeremy Chinn is a lot of the reason why the Commanders are where they are. They don't have that presence out there that says, okay, you're not running the football. That's something they're going to have to address in this draft. They're going to have to either get a middle linebacker or a hard-hitting safety in the draft. Or get both. You got to put a presence out there that's going to be the enforcer on the opposing team's run game. And then you need to get a running game of your own. I see this game going to the Houston Texans, but not by much. Not by much. Then we got the Seahawks and the 49ers, a rivalry game that consistently has been a back and forth kind of affair. 49ers getting healthy by the day, and the Seahawks foundering after what looked like a pretty decent start to a season, or looked like a promising start to the season, reeling off 3 wins and then proceeding to lose 3 in a row. Including a 36-24 defeat at the hands of the 49ers. But if you look at it, the Seahawks have lost they've lost 5 of the last 6. And they currently are riding a 6-game losing streak to the 49ers themselves. Now, the issue that I take exception with when I talk about this game is this. The Seahawks are not finding creative ways to get guys like Jackson Smith and Jigba the ball. Or DK Metcalf. When you can't say, okay, I'm going to give 2 different routes to these superstars. You got to basically say in a nutshell, okay, you're doing this, which is simple for me if I need it. And then you're the primary route guy. That's how I would write things. I'm going to write 2 simple routes. You're either going deep or you're going to be right here where I can have access to you. Then the other guy is going to have the primary route. Jackson Smith and Jigba, when this guy plays well, 90% of the time, good things happen for the Seahawks, and vice versa for DK Metcalf. But they have struggled immensely to get him the ball. And in order for you to be successful, if you're Seattle, now I get it. Most of the time, they want to try to run the football. Fine. But the truth of the matter is that has been inconsistent. The offensive line has been inconsistent. Kenneth Walker and Jack Carbonet have been inconsistent. And like I said, Cross has been inconsistent. That's your number 1 blocker. And then Abraham Lucas has been impressive at times. But then the rest of your guys have been kind of, yeah. The pass rush has not been consistent. And ultimately, your secondary has been pretty darn impressive, but if you can't get a consistent pass rush and teams are able to run the football on you, what can you do? And here's the bad thing. You've been consistently able to do certain things on offense. The problem that has eluded you has been the turnovers. Turnovers and inability to convert on turnovers when you get them. And I'm going to be Well, I'm gonna tell you, I saw that Rams game where the Seahawks turned the ball over and it was just a mess. And honestly, it was one of those games I sat and I watched and I said, how many times are y'all going to give the ball away? I mean, and then it turned out to be a 6-point defeat, despite how poorly you played. But then you look at the 49ers, whom, as well as a struggling Tampa Bay team played, they still were able to get the victory, despite the kicking woes, which I'm surprised this kid is still on the roster. But yeah, they gotta go to San Fran. I don't see this being a game that the Seahawks can win. Though, of course, they've won in Atlanta and convincingly. So, but it wouldn't surprise me if the 49ers walked off with that, and they pretty much seal the fate of the Seahawks and their early ambitions to win the NFC West. But let's get down to the final two. And it was really difficult for me to pick one, which was going to be the game of the week. But I think all of you knew it was going to be between these two games. You got the 7-3 Ravens and the 7-2 Steelers. Now, the one reason I'm going to go ahead and tell you and get it out the way, I'm taking the Steelers. Reason why I'm taking the Steelers is because the pass rush for the Baltimore Ravens has been sus, to say the least. And Russ is starting to get his game back. And I'm going to be honest with you. Let me just go ahead and say this right now to silence all the critics. I don't think Russ ever lost it. And everybody, you can see people critiquing him and saying he's this and he's doing that. Russ just needed to get his timing back, and he needed somebody that was going to say, hey, this is the kind of ball I play. This kind of ball I play. And he's thrown 6 touchdowns for 737 yards. Now, meanwhile, that doesn't look overly impressive, but what that does is it opens up opportunities for the running game, which is something Justin Fields was not able to do. Now you've got a Pittsburgh Steelers team that is, like I've always said, they do the one thing that you as a fan want and love to do. Run it, throw it deep. Run it, throw it deep. And you got 2 daggum acrobats as wide receivers. 2 acrobats. Not to mention, and this is something that surprises me as good of an eye for talent that Mike Tomlin has. Why the hell ain't you throwing the ball to Washington? 6'7". Man, there ain't no way in the world this boy ain't getting at least one look a game inside the red zone. 6'7"? Shh. Man, I put him out there in the daggum. I put him out there on the boundary. Line him up. See what somebody gonna do. Man. Light him up every time. Shoot, I'm giving him at least one throw. One. This ain't no exaggeration, y'all. Darnell Washington, 6'7". And he is on the Steelers. There ain't no reason the Steelers should have problems in the red zone. But then we're looking at the Baltimore Ravens. Then the reason why I'm so high on the Steelers winning this football game is because of Kyle Hamilton's injury. Now, he is slated to play in this game. However, I'm wondering how limited he is going to be. Now, saying he's not going to be limited, I will say, it could act up at any moment. I'm still wondering because, as a kid that is very impressed, as a guy who's very impressed with Kyle Hamilton and how important he is to this defense, if he doesn't play and he's not 110%, this is going to be chaos because what the Steelers like to do is they like to run the football, they like to go play action, and they like to throw it over the top. And the Baltimore Ravens like to play cover 1, cover 0 when they blitz. They either go all out or they drop one guy back into coverage. And they cannot afford to have Kyle Hamilton in coverage. They want him lined up on the guy in the slot. They want him doing what he does best. Either blitzing or he's covering the guy off the edge. The way I see this game going, the Steelers are pretty good stopping the run. However, this is Derrick Henry we're talking about with Lamar Jackson. I'm going to say that the the Ravens will not have learned their lesson. They're still trying to make Lamar Jackson a pocket passer, which is a disaster. Now, his numbers have been pretty good, but the games have been a lot closer when Lamar Jackson has had his share of throws. I think they keep forgetting about Derrick Henry, and that's the reason why I'm feeling like they're going to lose this game. Because I've had Derrick Henry all season, got him as a steal. But anytime the Ravens have lost, it has been because Derrick Henry has not gotten the totes. For whatever reason, Monken does not want him toting the football in some games. It's almost like he has okay, I'm going to save you for this game. This is the game he needs to run the football in. If you don't do anything else but you soften up that Pittsburgh defense, I feel like Baltimore is not going to do that. They're going to still continue this Lamar Jackson MVP campaign, and it's going to cost them. I think TJ Watt is arguably the best defensive player in the game. He's very good at getting to the quarterback, and the Ravens have had issues pass blocking on that side. And I think they continuously move TJ Watt around. He's a huge factor. He creates a turnover this weekend, and I think ultimately that is why they win again. The Steelers are not beating you with their offense. They're beating you with guys like TJ Watt and Minkah Fitzpatrick making plays out there. They're not beating you by just simply saying, hey, we're going to do this to you. We're going to throw bombs. They beat you by methodically just doing what they do. Now, the Steelers will be without Alex Highsmith. So you're talking about a Peyton Wilson and a Patrick Queen. This is a homecoming for him. Look for him to have a huge game. You got Larry Ogunjobi is going to be out. Look, one thing I can say about Mike Tomlin, I'm not crazy about him, but he finds a way to get it done. You can't argue with his results. So with that being said, I'm taking the Steelers. And finally, do the Chiefs get knocked off this week? And I remember seeing somebody say, is this the week that the Bills finally get over the hump against the Chiefs? I want to say yes. I really do. But for them to win this game, they're going to have to mix things up well. Because Mahomes has not been great. And honestly, the Bills' defense hasn't been great either. So this is shaping up as another game where Josh Allen is going to have to lead the charge. And the question is, can he get that done with a defense that's been less than wonderful? So I don't know. I look at it, and the Chiefs just keep finding ways to win. You know, with the block kick last weekend, that was a shoe-in. I personally wouldn't have tried to run the clock out. I would have been trying to go in. Because kickers have been great this year, and then there's been times where they've been... But evaluating this game, you got a great pass rush from the Chiefs. Same thing with the Bills, but the Bills on the back end have something to be desired. So ultimately, if I am the Kansas City Chiefs, I want to push the Bills to throw the football. You still are having trouble stopping the run as the Kansas City Chiefs. So you're hoping that they don't stick with Cook very long. You're hoping that eventually you're looking at hopefully them getting past crazy and they go back to the whole overusage of Josh Allen. Because ultimately, as I said, the Chiefs' secondary is pretty good and their pass rush is still really good. But ultimately, what you want is you don't want James Cook being that guy. Whereas on the flip side with the Kansas City Chiefs, you want to force Mahomes into some bad throws. Now, listen, Mahomes has not been good. Oh, well, he hasn't been great. He's been good enough. Let's just say that. He has not been great this season. But what we're seeing is they're going to come out and they're going to play their best football this week. This is going to be one of those games they've marked on their calendar. They understand that this is a team that is trying to build enough confidence to get the victory over them. They understand that this is a roadblock they cannot get past. And they ultimately understand this is what they need to do. They need to make it happen. With that being said, I ultimately think the way this game is going to work, I think the Bills get a perfect balance on offense. It's going to be too much for the Chiefs, and the Chiefs fall for the first time. And I say Mahomes has 2 turnovers in this game. I think the Bills pull off the upset. But guys, let me know what you think about week number 11. What games do you like? What games are you looking forward to? As well as what upsets are you looking forward to? And am I not speaking some things correctly? Please put them down in the comments. But make sure you comment down there, and make sure you go to Gridiron Guy Pro Style, the Facebook page. Also, check me out on Instagram at Mr. CeeLo and find out the other things I'm involved in. But until the next time, same Gab channel, same Gab platform.
But behold, there is a warm breeze that comes from the west. The blazing sounds of victory fuel their everlasting quest. It is a call to arms, for they are here. An army that has the will to challenge and the will to dare.